Welcome to Beneath the Grandstand. You are back for episode number 20. Happy birthday to the show. And welcome on once again, Mr. Alex Lohr. How you doing?
I'm doing good. If I was the Prof G show, I would make a reference to we are 1 year away from legal drinking age in the United States. But 20, I didn't think we'd get here. But now we are at 20 and we're talking about real life sports coming back big time.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about Kipchoge. This is really happening. I didn't take 20 episodes to get here, but hey, 2020.
We are, yeah. And NFL happened. I know for folks like myself, New England fans, we got to see Tom Brady lose in Tampa Bay. I don't know if I'm excited or sad by that, but there's a lot going on and a lot to talk about in this week's episode. But before we get into the specifics of this episode, Alex, some current events that have been going on that I feel like are really kind of affecting your neck of the woods. Big Ten announcement, University of Minnesota announcement. You got, on one hand, sports being cut from the Gophers program right down the road from you. But on the other hand, Big Ten announcing football is back, which is, you feel like, a lot of the reason sports were being cut in the first place. And cross country, NCAA cross country championships on March 15th.
Yeah, it's like, where do we start here? One, I want to give props to the team over. I know there was a student and like support march yesterday on campus at U of M, and I think, look, this only lays into more of the insight that the COVID is the scapegoat at this point, right? We are businesses, universities are being given agency to cut things that they aren't prioritizing, right? It's not about Title IX. It's about priorities and budgeting and creating a more stable infrastructure for collegiate athletics moving forward. So, what is the future of, NCAA athletics? And, my personal opinion is I think we need to tear down the tiers of like, hey, you need to have X amount of sports to be in Division I, because honestly, you should only be investing in sports that your university cares about, right? And so I know people want to hop on, like, I guess, demonizing Title IX and things like that. But I think at the end of the day, it's that we let this sports bubble grow way too big, way too fast, and it became completely unstable. When we can't support the basic events like track and field, we have a serious issue on our hands. And it is my opinion that COVID is simply just giving people the agency to cut things that aren't on the top of their priority list. You see it on campuses, and you see it at businesses, right? Businesses are taking sweeping cuts of a lot of their employees. The business might not actually be in trouble, but they're just using this as a mechanism to justify an arm of the company that they think may be, too fat, and they want to lean out. And they're given this kind of like validity and this kind of pass by the public to do so because of COVID. And I think it is being used way too much. And to see the University of Minnesota in a city like Minneapolis lose the diversity of a sport that men's track and field is super disappointing, especially given the current circumstances.
Yeah. I was trying to find it on Twitter. There was a tweet from, I think it was it might have been from Sam Seams, the president of the USTF CCCCA. But essentially it was just about, all this work with diversity and inclusion, and Minnesota cutting track and field, which is the second most diverse sport on their campus. And just, the comment essentially being like, with all this work around diversity and inclusion, it doesn't seem like this really fits into those plans with the cutting of a sport that actually provides that opportunity. So I think, I think it's just interesting what you say, where COVID's becoming a scapegoat. And I think we're seeing that in, outside of sports too. where it's just the easy thing to be like, man, it's a COVID year, and chalk it up to COVID. And that's, the march that you said it was happening, the conversations on Twitter and social media that are happening. I mean, those are the things that will hopefully bring conversation up in a bigger way, in a bigger light, and kind of call people on that when it is, and we all have to say there are situations that COVID is affecting and really, really actually causing an impact. So not saying, hey, this is a blanket statement, COVID is the scapegoat for everybody in every situation. Obviously not. But there are business decisions being made that, this is kind of the easy out.
Totally. And yeah, absolutely. There's totally valid reasons that and moments and situations where COVID is affecting people's livelihoods. Absolutely. But the frustration, I think, especially in the men's track and field instance, is it doesn't feel like there was a opening for problem solving at all, right? It really felt like the door was closed. They weren't open to exploring different options. And I think that is where you're seeing the most frustration with the alumni. Nobody seemed to be contacted. Nobody really saw it coming. And, we understand, you have to be able to pay for things, right? But you have to at least engage with the alumni, and at least explore all opportunities. And I think it is the opinion of most people associated with the program that not all avenues were explored. And that just feels like they were betrayed by this university that is their identity, right? This how many people in your life do you know have friendships because they're on the track team, are married because they're on the track team, have kids because they're on the track team? I'm one of those people. I realize what the community, what those families really mean. And I think, when do we stop justifying, is this non-revenue or is this profitable, right? So I was a music major in college. Marching band, should we have it? I don't know. How do I justify people having marching bands? It's just where do we draw the line here? And I think I don't deny that there's been economic impacts, absolutely. But are we exploring all options? I can tell you the Go for Track and Field family does not feel like that happened.
Yeah. And these are, things that we'll be talking about and digging into. And, the NCAA cross country decision where indoor track championships are, I think, the 12th and 13th, and cross country follows 2 days later. So a lot for us to dig into in the weeks ahead. But for now, I transition to this week's conversation because it's a big one. We're about 2 weeks out from the largest, when I say largest, quote unquote, marathon, possibly in 2020. And we're not talking about participation numbers out on the streets. We're talking about in terms of notoriety, and that's the London Marathon. London Marathon, I think, is the most popular marathon in the world in terms of, over 450,000 people apply to this event. And today we talked to Hugh Brasher, the director, race director of this event, and he shares some of those numbers. And as comparison, here in the States, we think of Boston and New York. New York is somewhere around 150,000, Hugh told us, in terms of applicants. So we're talking about a race that's 3 times the size of applications to get in as New York City, which is crazy. One of the coolest thing about the conversation today is having this guest on in Hugh that has such a deep history in running, not just within the London Marathon, but outside of that. He was named the race director in 2012, but his dad started this race back in the 80s when Hugh was around 15 or 16 years old. His dad was an Olympic gold medalist in the 50s. He paced Roger Bannister to a sub 4-minute mile. His mom was a French Open champion in tennis. He was part of the team that put on the Ineos 159 race for Kipchoge. So the amount of experience at such a high level of sport that Hugh brings is really, really special and significant. So we talk about that. We talk about this race this year, COVID. Going back to what you said, that, this was an easy year to chalk it up as a loss, and Hugh's team didn't do that. This race is going. We talked about how many dates and formats did they go through, how many ideas did you have to discuss to get to where you are today, and how close was it to being canceled. And also, we talk about the economic impact, not just on the race itself and what that means for them moving forward, but for those around them associated to it, the economy of London that is impacted by not having 45 to 50,000 people come in for race weekend. So there's a lot we dig into there with Hugh.
Yeah, a lot of we dive into the business side of it and the economic impact, but of course we also dive in to the matchup, right? It's something we've all been waiting for, to finally see Kipchoge versus Bekele, and we do dive into that. We talk about the course. We talk about all the intricacies of making this matchup finally happen, the headaches they went through, the precautions they're going through, and we get into the nitty-gritty of how they're approaching enabling the greatest performances ever to actually happen and broadcast it for 8 hours for our enjoyment coming up here in October.
Yeah, and for folks and listeners of this show that are outside the U.S. and Canada and Australia, a number of countries in Europe, you'll actually be able to watch that race on FlowTrack. It'll again be broadcast live. They're doing it in a way where the men's race, the women's race, and the wheelchair race all happen back to back after one another. So it'll be a full celebration day of marathon competition, which we're excited about. But with that said, let's get to this conversation and throw it to our conversation with Mr. Hugh Brasher, the race director of the London Marathon. Hugh, welcome to the show. And to kick things off, where are you, and what is London Marathon events looking like right now in terms of the team and where you guys are stationed?
Yeah, so I'm currently in my kitchen in Twickenham, which is a sort of suburb of London. It's about 11 miles outside the centre of London. And the team are, I think, excited, pressurised, but looking forward to the 4th of October and welcoming some of the greatest athletes, the greatest marathon runners in the world, who are going to compete in a new way on a new London Marathon course, and really hopefully show the world and inspire the world in a way that the marathon does, I think, uniquely among sports and running events.
Yeah, it's I would say definitely a bright spot for fans out there. As we all know, most marathons, and major marathons, especially when you look at the World Marathon Majors, all not taking place. London Marathon, kind of that beacon of light, I guess you could say, in terms of giving us something to look forward to this year. So, as we kind of dig into everything that you guys have been through, I'm curious to know that, when we look back to March and, COVID happens, events start shutting down. From that point to now, how many dates have you guys gone through and considered? How many formats of this race have you gone through and considered to get to where we are today and about 2 weeks to go?
Yeah, I think the date that we postponed the 40th London Marathon and the 2020 Virgin Money London Marathon was Friday the 13th of March. And I think the announcement was about 17:05 in the afternoon. It's not that that's indelibly imprinted on my brain. But we already had an alternative date, which was the 4th of October. And we had a city, we had a government, that wanted the event to happen, that realizes that marathon running is about bringing communities together, that does so much good in raising charity. The London Marathon, since my father and John Disley founded the event in 1981, has raised over £1 billion for good causes, the runners taking part in it. And it is the world's largest one-day annual fundraising event. Last year, it was 66 million. That's $100 million raised effectively just from the one event. I mean, it does depend on the exchange rate, but so the importance, I think, to bringing people together, bringing society together. The boroughs that we run through, the communities that we run through, the Mayor, Transport for London, the Royal Parks were so helpful in allowing us to transition to a new date very early on, and to be able to make that announcement of the new date on that 13th of March, which I think was step number one. And then just in terms of these scenarios, I mean, I think I was talking about them to some of the press pretty well when the London Marathon was meant to be happening. And I think at that stage, we had 11 scenarios on a piece of paper. I think it was at that stage, A to J, it might have been A to I can't quite remember. And that piece of paper changed quite regularly and was updated quite regularly. I definitely remember there was another one I did on the 4th of May, another one I did on the 11th of May. Some of the scenarios, a lot of them were still there, but they were just in a different order about what statistical probability that we thought of the event going ahead, what different plans would be. So yeah, we're in such a strange world that is changing quicker. Society, I think, is changing quicker than at any time any of us have ever lived through, and probably quicker than any time in hundreds of years. Whether you go to the Industrial Revolution previously, I've no idea. But the speed of change is just so, and the uncertainty that we all face. And so you just have to be really agile in your thought and try and not get worried about throwing away one scenario and starting again. And the team have been incredible at thinking of them, incredible at adapting to them, and we are delighted to be having the event on the 4th of October in this new way, in a way that is appropriate for a COVID-19 world. And we really hope that in the future we'll be able to get back to normality.
Yeah. I mean, I'm curious to know, like, was there any point where you guys were on the verge of having to cancel? Because for most events, or for outsiders, right? It looks, the dominoes start falling, events are being canceled. And it just seems that it's kind of inevitable, right? And events are just going to get canceled unless we have a significant change. But it sounds like for you guys, it was a little bit opposite, where we're going to have this event unless something else causes us to not be able to move forward. So just, is that accurate? And how, was there any points where you were close to having to shut it down?
I think that's in a way right. Our intention was always for the event to go ahead as long as we could, and that we were allowed to. And I think allowed is the word to use here, because the event is taking place in a biosecure bubble. And that is, some work that the British government started to allow elite sport to take place in. And what we are grateful for is we're not the first sport to create that biosecure bubble, and we're able to learn from other sports that have done it. So Formula One taking place at Silverstone on consecutive weekends, cricket. Both those sports have taken place in a biosecure bubble, and so are we. So, and I think, so once the government had started, talking about that, and that was quite early, that gave us some more certainty that at least an elite event could go on. But yeah, I mean, everyone was determined in the team to try and make it happen. And this is, for charities. I mean, one of the first things we did, which your listeners might not know about because it was in Britain, but we created, along with other mass participation organisers, something called the 2.6 Challenge. And that took place on the 26th of April, when the marathon should have been taking place. We raised, in 22 days, created a brand. It got huge traction in the UK. We raised over £11 million for charity. And that was just because businesses, celebrities just wanted to get behind it, because there we were back in April, shut in our houses, only allowed out to exercise or to shop. And I think, we're human beings. We want to be together. We want to meet together. And social interaction is so important to us. So, the community of runners is a really strong community. And I think that, we have the 40th race still going on in virtual reality, and we've sold out. We have 45,000 people taking part in it. We're pretty well sold out in 4 days. But that's about building a social community, a purpose. And I think that's just a purpose of hope, a purpose of creating togetherness in a virtual world through social media, and doing it at the same time as the gods of our sport, who normally would be running with us on the same day. That's the great thing about the marathon. In no other sport are you competing at the same time. We're not playing on the centre court of Wimbledon. You're not at, you're not at the Super Bowl final in, I think it was last year in Miami. You're not on the pitch. But in marathon running, you are on the pitch at the same time in the same conditions. If you're good enough, you could be up there with the elite athletes. So it's such a great thing that our sport has, and we really hope that we will reflect that on the 4th of October. And our runners and our community will support it and get inspired by the people taking part across the world in 109 countries. People are taking part, and hopefully through the broadcast, which will be broadcast around the world. And there's 8 hours and 20 minutes of live BBC coverage, 3 races back to back, with just stunning athletes who are desperate to show the world their trade, to compete against each other, and I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really actually excited about it.
Hugh, I think we want to come back to the broadcast formats. You talk about 8 hours of content. I know obviously our demographic is going to lean into that, and they'll get up early to enjoy it for sure. But I want to bring it back to, you mentioned kind of the speed of change and society adapting to the current challenges. And, we've read some of the kind of outside the box thinking that your team has brought to the table when it comes to making this race happen. For instance, we heard about the blue chip tracking that might allow for contact tracing. But I'd love to hear, based on kind of those innovations and explorations, and maybe the inspiration of some of the other sporting events that you just mentioned, how far out of the box did your team have to explore to make some of these scenarios happen? I mean, we've heard about the Bluetooth thing, but is there something that maybe the fans don't know about, a scenario that really might shock us to understand how far your team might have has gone to make this event run?
I don't know what your listeners will find shocking and how far outside the box that they're used to thinking. So it's difficult to answer that, other than to say that what we always said was that we could run the event socially distanced. So the event could take part in a socially distanced manner. This was not just about setting people off in a socially distanced manner. It was actually looking at how the runners would get to the start line, looking at the trains that they would take, because, each major marathon, we're part of Abbott World Marathon Majors. And by the way, just the support of the other race directors, we have phone conversations every 2 weeks. I had one 8 hours ago, I think it was, where we spent an hour on it. And I did say I would be copying some of their ideas. And one of them went, "Oh, no, you don't copy anything." I went, no, I want to copy it. I think just what the world is doing at the moment is working together in a way. This is what we have to do in a COVID world. Whether it's scientists working together, testing facilities working together, the more that we can work together, we'll come to solutions. And I think that technology that you talked about, that was our Bluetooth and sort of RFID technology together. We're actually using it. Going to be using it to build the event. We're going to be using it in the biosecure bubble, so that our contractors are safe. We'll be using it at the hotel, where we've taken over the hotel. It's got 40 acres of land, so the athletes can train. They don't get out of the hotel. We've chartered aeroplanes to bring athletes in. I don't know what out the box is, but you just have to, there is some out of the box thinking in the last 48 hours, just talking about 2021. I mean, our event is October the 3rd, 2021, and we've got some interesting ideas for 2021. So we're always, I think the thing that sometimes surprises people. I mean, certainly when I got the job as event director of the London Marathon, people said, "Oh, that sounds amazing. What do you do for the other 51 weeks of the year?" But don't in reality, absolutely. And we are looking for 2021. We're looking for 2022. We actually have a business plan that has elements of it through till 2029, which might sound crazy, but you adapt to these things, you amend them, and at the moment you just rip them up and start all over again.
Hugh, I just wanted to before we go too far from it. So this bubble you're describing at the hotel. So it's for the people that haven't read about the Bluetooth chips and tracking, everyone within this bubble will have this technology. So if you or I were near each other at any point throughout our time on that property and one of us contracted COVID, we would be notified. Like, I would know, how intricate is that for people within that bubble that you're describing?
Okay, so everyone wears it. Each sensor is individual to the person, so it's named to that person. You set the distance that you want to maintain away from somebody. So you can set it to 2 meters, 1.5 meters, 1 meter. It will go off. It will beep and actually flash when you are too close to somebody, so that you then move away. Wow. The issue is not about how if you're too close to someone for a short period of time, that's not a problem. But what it then is doing is tracking everybody through the whole day. And should someone at a later stage contract COVID, coronavirus, then what we can do is find out whether that person tells us they contracted it, and we can then find out through the technology and through the data whether anyone spent more than 15 minutes within a 2 meter radius of that person, and if so, we could let them know that they should therefore go and get tested. So, and it's accurate to plus or minus 10 centimeters. It's produced by a company called Tharsis. It's just coming out, and we've been talking to them. Again, it's just one of those bizarre connections where they rang us. I was connected to we were part of the organizing team for the Ineos 159 challenge for Eliud Kipchoge. Our operations team, we put that event on, and actually it was bizarrely someone was trying to get a contact through that and spoke to me in February. Nothing was going on in terms of COVID, that anyone really realized at that stage. And then all of a sudden in April, I'm going, ooh, that technology, that could be quite interesting. What's coming on? This is what we want to use it for. Yeah. Could it work? They start doing testing. They're being incredibly helpful. And there'll be more announcements about it and how we're using it. But it's just one element of we have amazing partners. With the Virgin Money London Marathon, we've got Abbott, a huge American company in healthcare technology, and the COVID testing that we're doing in partnership with Abbott, and TCS, Tata Consultancy Services, are our partner for technology, and the app is powered by TCS. Some of the interaction that we're going to have on the app to try and inspire people on their 26.2 miles on the day, the 45,000 people, we hope will surprise and delight them. I'm not going to talk too much about what they are at the moment, because that's hopefully the surprise and delight. But that technology, is part of a journey I think society is on, and I think that more and more technology will be coming out, and whatever is going to happen in the future, it will probably be using technology in a way that we haven't necessarily thought about. And you just got to be open to it. You've got to be looking for it. And I think hopefully by us putting the event on in the way that we are, again, it encourages other people, and also puts us at the forefront, so people will come to us with further ideas. Because, as I said earlier on, the power of marathon running, the power of the community is a force for good. And the sooner that we can get back doing that good, and being able to run together, then everyone is better off.
It's exciting and scary. Kind of sounds like what our world might look like in a few months with tracking. I mean, it's interesting.
Yeah, and it is, and it depends on whether you're going to get scared by it, and some people will and say that they shouldn't do it, or whether you embrace it. And you can't tell anybody what to do, right? Everyone has to make their own personal decision these days. I think you have to be aware that we could be in for a long period of change, and that anything you do for any length of time, that change actually becomes the new normal. So, and no one knows what that's going to be. But you just got to be open and aware of what might happen, and go with it, and try and control what you can, and not get worried about what you can't.
I think it's fascinating, Hugh, how, when we first think of, as far as innovation and technology when it comes to marathons and running, it's over the last year and 2 years, we've been thinking from a design and, footwear technology perspective. But now it has become the stage for this kind of innovation that the world will eventually be adapting, like we're talking about, this tracking platform, and giving, I guess, scientists and engineers a platform and almost like a stage to test these opportunities and new technologies in this running space. I just think it's really interesting that so many pieces of innovation are now happening just on the roads and just kind of circling around our sport. I'd love to help our viewers understand a little bit more about that actual tracking device. What does it look like when they're walking around the hotel? Is it like something in your lanyard? Is it on your foot? Like, what does that look like? And who is given that device? Who's let into the bubble, I guess?
So if I just go to the bubble bit, I mean, we have taken over a whole hotel. There is security in that hotel, and no one is allowed in that hotel unless they've been COVID tested. So the staff are COVID tested. There's protocol within that hotel in terms of food times. Everyone has their own room. Again, bubbles of athletes, because they'll be in their own bubbles anyway. So effectively, what you do is create these bubbles surrounding people, and there's one at the hotel, and there is one on the mall where the athletes are competing, and then the transport between the two is also part of the bubble. So you have to then have the drivers who have been tested, taking the athletes from one biosecure bubble to another biosecure bubble. So when they, the principle is when you check into the hotel, you are given your personal device, and I've probably got one in the cupboard slightly to my right, but it's basically about the size of an orange that has been squashed flat. Is probably the easiest way I could describe it. So if you punched an orange down, you can't get it totally flat. So it's probably about 2.5 centimeters thick, and the radius of the circle, it's a circular. The radius is, or the diameter, I think, actually is probably around about 5 centimeters, maybe 6 centimeters. Everyone's wearing it, and as I say, you then have the noise and the light going off if you get too close to someone to warn you just to back off. I mean, that's what it is. And in the bubble, people will be wearing face masks. They just won't be wearing them when they're eating. They're obviously not going to be wearing them when they're running. This is all to protect the athletes and the staff and everyone that's working at that event.
Hugh, I'd love to dig into the elite side of this here more, and we will here in a moment. And before we do, I do want to look at this event that is known to be a mass participation event. I think you guys are around 40 to 45,000 finishers in a given year, and this year there'll be about 40. Not including the virtual event.
Why are you not including it?
Well, just in terms when we look at logistics of shutting down a city and all these things that go into it, right? And so I'm curious to help people understand what the challenges were that you guys had to work through to get to the point of this elite only race and kind of a closed circuit loop when you're talking about running 40,000+ people through one of the largest cities in the world, right? Like what went into that to get to that point of saying, hey, this just isn't going to be possible for 2020?
Okay, I think there's a few different questions tied up, so I'll try and make sure I answer them in an order, but if I don't, then come back to it. So the first bit in terms of what does it take to be able to do the 2020 Virgin Money London Marathon around St James's Park in the middle of a city, in the middle of one of the busiest cities in the world, and what permission does it take? It takes national government. So to get us onto the list of elite athletes, of elite sports events that can take place in a biosecure bubble. So you have to have national government, and then you deal with the Mayor of London and Transport for London, which is an agency. Transport for London operates all the trains, all the buses, the infrastructure to move people around London. The Royal Parks, St James's Park is a beautiful park. The finish line of the 2020 event of the 40th race is the same finish line for every year. It's about. I mean, if I got my, I haven't quite remember this data. I'm normally pretty good, but it's about 2.1295 meters per lap. Kilometers, not meters. Blimey, that would be short. Kilometers. Yeah, a lot of, they're going around an awful lot of times. Kilometers per lap, and what you have to do is get permission off each one of those. Then Westminster Council. Westminster is the borough surrounding the Royal Parks. And you have to look to go through your protocols with Public Health England. You have to go through what are called safety advisory groups to show everything that you're doing. That park still needs to be open to residents, but those residents who are in the centre of the park with the athletes running sort of this square around it can't see the event. So you've got to make sure that it's you've screened the whole event. And then we put a bridge over the top of the over the course so that residents can get from one park to another and still enjoy London, because and you've got some amazing, this is history in terms of where the course is. You're going, Horse Guards. You basically you start on the Mall near Admiralty Arch, and then you do a right-hand turn into something called Horse Guards Road. And for those of your listeners that watched London 2012 and saw the beach volleyball in Horse Guards Parade, that's what they're running past 20 times. So you go Horse Guards Road, you take a right-hand turn up Birdcage Walk, and that is effectively, you're now on the last kilometre of the normal London Marathon. So Birdcage Walk right into Spur Road, and then past the Queen Victoria Memorial, the Golden Statue, and the right-hand turn, and the last 200 metres to the finish line. And it's a quick course. David Weir became the first man to do a sub 3-minute mile on that course. We run an event called the Vitality Westminster Mile. We have over 9,000 people doing a mile event, 33 different races during the day. And he did a sub 3-minute mile. He did 2:57 for the mile back in, I think it was about 2017. So it's a quick course. It's not as quick as Vienna. As I said, we looked at this course when we were looking for courses for the Ineos 159 Challenge. So those are the permissions that just some of the permissions that you need to get, and you're really dealing with it's public health, it's dealing with security, the Metropolitan Police, the emergency services in terms of athlete health, in terms of trying to ensure that people can still move around London. It's an enclosed space, and it is effectively sort of the Queen's back garden, so to speak. So it is just the most iconic place to hold a race of 3 different races of about 150 athletes between the para athletes and the men's and women's elite events, and also we're delighted that so many athletes are coming to try and get Olympic qualification, and working with World Athletics on that to allow that. They moved the qualification timeline. Originally it was the 1st of December. It got moved to the 1st of September, and I think that's so important for people running the marathon. So yeah, the permissions thing is a major part of it, and working with all those agencies and giving them the certainty of the absolute detail that the team have to go into is huge. And then you're looking at branding, the TV coverage, working with the BBC to understand how they can best show the viewer, engage the viewer. As I said earlier, it's 8 hours of 20 minutes. And for those film buffs, they could watch the whole of the Hobbit trilogy in 8 hours and 20 minutes. But, and we've got, again, hopefully some really exciting things to announce just on how to engage with the athletes and what will be seen on the day, and a couple of innovations. And as I say, what we learned from the Ineos 159 Challenge, we're trying to take into this. So it's a huge undertaking, but one that the team, who are working so incredibly hard on, are inspired by, because as you said earlier, this is not happening elsewhere around the world. We're the only Abbott World Marathon major event taking place this fall. Tokyo back in March was the last one, and to have Kenenisa, Bekele, Eliud Kipchoge, Bridget Kosgei, Manuela Shah, Daniel Romanchek. It's just mouthwatering. As I say, every time I talk about it, I just get enthused.
Hugh, for our listeners at home, we got to hop on that. Can you clarify? You just said 257 mile, correct?
I just said a 257 mile. Yeah, he pushed a 257 mile, and we'd been trying for years. It was incredible, a 257 mile. And so the speed, if you think it's a quick course, and it's gonna be fun, and we've got some really interesting ideas that we're not going to talk about yet. But again, about how to really ignite the wheelchair event that doesn't usually get so much coverage, and yet will be shown live, the whole of it, the men's and women's race. And as I say, there's some interesting stuff that I'll whet your appetite for, and then I'll be fascinated afterwards as to what people thought.
Well, we're looking forward to those little the entree from the appetizer there, Hugh.
Yeah.
I wanted to follow up with you. You mentioned all the support around the marathon from the City of London, from the country of England, and I just it's such a moment for the city. Typically, in typical situation when London Marathon happens in a typical year, what was the support or challenges that you might have faced or feedback you got from kind of the local organizing committees, whether it be the City of London or even the hotel, and kind of travel industry? Was there kind of a push to hopefully have the marathon as it usually is, because it is such a driver of economic impact? What was the feedback you were kind of getting from those who had a vested interest in kind of the economic impact of the London Marathon?
I think all we've ever had on this journey is amazing support from everybody. I think everyone, the number of conversations that I was having, that the team was having with our sponsors, with the hotel industry, with the travel industry, this is people's lives and livelihoods. And it is incredibly difficult, and it's very easy to be smart afterwards. We're all on a journey, and I think everyone is just trying to do their best. And I go back to what I said earlier about how we need to support each other, and the support that we've had from every from everyone has just been immense to help us to put the event on safely. And it has to be about safety for spectators, participants. It has to be, there's a wider message here. There's a message of hope, but there is also a message of doing it safely. And you've always got to balance these things up, and listen to what people have to say, respect what they have to say, work with them. And that's what the team have done, but also provide leadership and a drive and a desire to make it happen. I mean, the easiest thing to do, without a doubt, through that process would have been to say, we're not doing it. This is just too much. But we didn't. I'm so glad we didn't. But it was just, the pressure is at times unrelenting because of the changes that everyone was having to make so often. I mean, I remember we were having we have a management board at the company, and we were having an away day, and I think this was in April on a Monday. And I started to do the scenarios that we were going to run through on that away day. And that, as I said, that was April, and wrote out the scenarios on Friday, on Thursday, sent them out Thursday. I had to send an email out Friday going, right, this has now happened, ripped them up, sent a new lot out Friday night. Something happened Friday night, sent a new one out Saturday. Amazingly, that one was the one we debated on the Monday. But that's just the world that we're currently living in. And and where we've ended up is this 40th race that I genuinely believe will go down in the annals of London Marathon history as one of the greatest marathons that we've ever put on, for so many different reasons. Whether it is the 45,000 people doing it their way, their course, the fact that it's the most inclusive London Marathon ever, because you can take 23 hours, 59 minutes and 59 seconds. The fact that we have got 45,000 school kids also signed up to do the mini London Marathon, the Virgin Money Giving mini London Marathon of 2.6 miles. And this is primary school kids, so kids from the age of 5 to the age of 11. In the UK, the levels of exercise have plummeted in kids. Lots more adults are running, but in kids, it's really plummeted. So, for them to be able to see these greatest athletes and them to take part in their 2.6 challenge, get a medal at the end of it, we hope is a real part of what London Marathon events is all about, which is inspiring activity.
Hugh, I have a follow-up just in terms of, economic impact. Alex was kind of talking about those surrounding the event. I'm curious for your organization specifically, how has this impacted you? Because I think, you said something very interesting. You said it would have been really easy for us to just say, hey, we're not going to do it this year. It's just too crazy, right? It probably, there's a revenue impact that you don't get, right? There's sponsors, there's broadcasts, there's all these things, but there's probably a number of cost savings you have by not having an event. But then, you look at registration, and I don't know how all that plays out, but, in it just, 40,000 people register and they all defer to another year, you may get that revenue, but that means you're not getting the revenue from them in other years, right? So there's an impact all the way around, no matter how you look at it. So I'm just curious, how has it affected your organization as you look ahead, and where are things that, like, will there be areas you guys have to figure out how to make up the gap, or adjustments you'll need to make? What are your biggest concerns as you look ahead to planning for these future years?
Wow, how long have we got? So, the entry system for the London Marathon is one of the most complicated entry systems you could possibly imagine. So I'm not going to try and explain it. However complicated it was to make it, and I didn't make it, by the way, however complicated it was to make it, to try and unravel it and effectively take 54,000 people, because that's how many people would have got in, and then not a lot of people decide not to do it. And get a deferral system in place that where we can give everybody a place in a future London Marathon, be it 2021, 2022, or 23. And I think one of the key bits also, just on the journey that we've been in, and the support that we've gotten, just to show it, is when we announced that the 40th race was taking place on the 4th of October. We also announced that the 41st race was taking place on the 3rd of October next year. So we moved it from its April date to its October date. And being able to do that, and then you've got only 7 months till the 42nd event, which is back in April 2022. And the complications of notification of a ballot system. I mean, we're the most popular marathon on the planet. 456,000 people applied in only 6 days to do the 40th race. And it's I think Tokyo is the second most popular, and New York the third. But New York, I think, had probably 150,000 applicants. It is trying to unravel that, and the consequences of that are still slightly unknown, because people have until this interview is taking place on the 17th, and people have of September, and people have until the 18th of September to tell us what they want to do. And once they've told them what they want to do, we've then got to work out what we can allow them to do. The consequences longer term, and what's going to happen in 2021, I think, going back to sort of the Abbott World Marathon Majors conversation, we had a race directors get together in January, an in-person meeting that we have every 6 months. And as each one of us were looking ahead, and as a group, we were looking ahead to the most incredible, it was our 40th race. It was New York's 50th. Just the most incredible year of events, and the plans that each event had was incredible. But to now be where we're at, the consequences are huge. We don't know what they are, but we're trying to work it through and look at the statistical probabilities of what we can do. And we've got so many scenarios already for 2021. And as I said earlier, we're even planning for 2022. So yeah, I don't know the answer in terms of long term. But again, we will be figuring them out, and we already have lots of different scenarios, and we're just trying to meander, I think, our way through, because you have to go with the flow of the information that you're getting, and the information at the moment in the UK is not brilliant. They're talking about, there are more local lockdowns. So, where will we be with a vaccine? Will a vaccine actually work? No one knows, but I'm sure we will, as a society, adapt, start using technology more. We want to be part of that, and we really want to try and get people back safely running together, doing on this incredible 26.2 mile journey.
Well, I guess a good problem to have is 450,000 people want to come to the event. So there's a bright spot there. And as we look at long-term effects and some of that being unknown, a short-term view that we do know is this elite field. And so I want to kind of bring it back there, and get into some of the juice around that. And I think for you, Hugh, it's interesting because your background is tied so significantly to historical elite performances, and your dad being a pacer for Roger Bannister's sub-4, you and your team being a part of the Eliud Kipchoge 159 race. So, and not to discredit other event directors out there, because we know a lot of them and they do an unbelievable job, but having that tie within just your family alone, what does that mean for you when you're trying to set up races like you normally do, but even ones like now that are solely focused in terms of the broadcast on the elites?
Yeah, I think you left out my mum, who won the French Tennis Open.
Yeah, there we go.
Jeez.
Anything else we should add to this, or is that a different podcast?
Well, you left out you did leave out my old man's gold medal in Melbourne in 1956. But what the heck? Yeah, I mean, I'm a failure, basically. It's as simple as that. I always joke. I'm not sure whether this is going to work in the American audience, but in horse racing, obviously the dam and the sire. If my parents were a dam and a sire, as a yearling, I would have been sold for an enormous amount of money, because the dam and the sire had an amazing heritage. By the time I got to about the age of 18, I'd have been sold for glue at a selling handicap somewhere in Southall. But I mean, it's amazing to be brought up in that, but actually my heart is in just inspiring people, the everyday person, to do sport. That's where my heart is. I've got a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, 2 girls, and sport teaches you that sport played in the right way with the right values teaches you so much. The more that you put in, the more that you will get out. And that doesn't matter what standard you are. It is true in any standard. And also, you don't have to be the best in the world. You just can be the best that you want to be. And that can be walking the 26.2 miles. It can be remembering and celebrating someone else's life on that 26.2 miles. And if that truly is encouraging, inspiring people to go on a journey of bringing sport into their life, because it is so good for your physical and mental health. And go back to the COVID world, obesity has been shown to have a bad outcome should you get coronavirus, COVID-19. And so, there are some terrible statistics in the UK, and I'm sure they're no different in America. But 1 in 10 of our kids goes into primary school, age 5, obese, and 1 in 5 come out obese, age 11. Now that can't be good. That can't be good for society. That can't be good for their physical and mental health. Can't be good for what we have in our country, National Health Service, and the costs involved. So, yeah, I grew up in an amazing environment, and sport was just, that's just what you did. Not my parents' level, but yeah, it's much more about inspiring the everyday person to start on that journey of getting active and enjoying it and having fun.
Hugh, I think it's really incredible that you got to be part of that journey with the Ineos team and seeing Eliud out there. And I think when we do focus on the extremes of sport, and it is the Eliuds and the Kenenisa and Caroline, and I think I think when we the running fans who have been dying to see Eliud and Bekele versus Kipchoge, we've been talking about it for almost 3 years now. When the London race announced that both were going to be competing, but then it was canceled, did you as a fan feel like there was a pressure or a sense of urgency to make this race happen so we can have that moment of these athletes at their peak?
I mean, just as a fan, you want it to happen. But again, it was outside our control. We didn't know, in terms of what races that they were already contracted to do in the fall season.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so, that they have their own plans. I mean, that if you just go back to October the 12th and October the 13th, where Bridget Kosgei smashes Paula Radcliffe's world record in Chicago. I mean, that 2:14, that record that had stood. I mean, what an incredible weekend. Barack Obama is tweeting about marathon running and the inspiration, and just Eliud's message as well about no human is limited, and linking it back to Sir Roger Bannister and 65 years before. I mean, he is an amazing man. He's erudite, he's considered, he's kind, he's everything that you would hope a champion would be, let alone a GOAT. Which I mean, his record is unbelievable. I'm sure your listeners know what I'm talking about. I'm not calling him an actual GOAT, but greatest of all time. Greatest of all time, and whether he's the greatest athlete of all time or whether he's without a doubt the greatest marathon runner of all time, that is without a doubt. But what he talks about and how he talks is incredible, and his preparation. I mean, you talked about Ineos and 159 and what we learned from there, and working with Sir Dave Brailsford and other people like Robbie Ketchell. Our team loved being part of it, and some of what we learned we're using on the 4th of October. I think, and you could start getting into the shoe conversation, but start talking about tartan tracks versus cinder tracks. Tartan tracks suddenly changed performances, and that was what they were running on. My old man, when he won his Olympic gold medal in Melbourne in 1956, his spikes were made of titanium. That was 1956. They were the lightest spikes. I think it took something like till 1996 for a lighter pair of spikes to be made. So there's always been technology going on. Eliud anyway is just amazing sort of light for our sport. I mean, Manuela Shah, I mean, I think she's unbeaten in 2.5 years at the marathon, and now Daniel Romanchek is the sort of new guy on the block, and his performances in the last 18 months have just been quite incredible. And, we're really looking forward. I mean, Ruth Chepngetich versus Bridget, and, that women's field is just incredible. So, again, I'm getting too excited about it, but we absolutely, of course, we wanted Eliud and Kenenisa to happen, and we hope that they're both there in good shape, and they've had issues in terms of training, and are they able to train together, not together, but with their training groups, which they haven't, and we just hope they're in really good shape. But I know they want to put on a great performance, and it isn't just about them. Muley Wasser, and there are other great athletes in that field, and I'm sure there'll be some surprises on the day. And as I say, just can't wait.
Yeah, I'm sure there's athletes banging down the door trying to get into this race because it will be one of the most impressive ever. I think it's really interesting for our fans to understand your association with that, the 159 project, because there almost was a little bit of divisiveness between, what some would call, the purists of marathon running, who maybe railed against some of the just some of the features and some of the strategies around empowering and enabling Eliud to that record. But I think it's interesting that you were part of that, because it's fair to say that you at your core are a marathon race director, and you still want to see that same performance, in a proper, we could call a proper race. So I'm wondering, when the balance between an event like the 159 approach and a proper, verified, valid marathon approach, what were some of the boundaries that you as a race director had to put up that said, no, that doesn't feel like, this feels like we're maybe overstepping. This feels like it might help the athlete too much. Like, where do you put those kind of standards up that you need to enable athletes to have their best day, but you still want to, honor the traditions that is the London Marathon?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to try and correct you when you're saying that what Eliud did in Vienna on the 12th of October wasn't proper. My God, that was proper.
Absolutely.
And look, I'm not trying to change other people's minds. I go back to, everyone is allowed their own opinion, and those opinions should be debated. You don't have to change your mind. I'll go back again to history, and as you said, my dad was the pacemaker to Sir Roger Bannister along with Chris Chataway. They tried to break the 4-minute mile, and they went to a track at Motspur Park, and my dad stopped running and jogged after lap 2 in order to do lap 4. And that then got disqualified by the then 3As because they had broken the rules. And actually, if you go back, pacemaking didn't used to be allowed. So just because we use pacemaking in a new format, I mean, talk to any one of those pacemakers about what Eliud did on that day, and ask them if they think that was proper. I mean, the camaraderie among them, and what did we try to do is give it absolutely as much integrity as possible. We knew that the drinks. The fact that a runner has to run off course to get a drink, is that right? Just because those are the rules at the moment doesn't mean they're going to be the rules forever. So I think the whole remit of 159, the Ineos 159 challenge was to see, was it humanly possible to do something that people had said wasn't. Try and give Eliud the best conditions to do it, but what he did on that day, how he did it, was absolutely incredible. And yeah, I just think that I'm not trying to change a purist mind, and I'm not trying to say I'm not a purist. I'm just trying to say that I'm always open to change. I'm always open to experimenting, but I think you have to have integrity at the heart of that. And does it feel right? Is he getting artificial assistance? And that's where you start getting into some of this stuff about shoes and plates, and he's run 26.2 miles. He's you know, I mean, I went to Nike's offices in Oregon, and you know, I know their VP of footwear design, Tony Bignall. I used to run against him 25 years ago, and we're both getting on a bit, and we decided to go for a run to their track. And I said, "Do you want to do a Kipchoge?" And he goes, "What's that?" I went, "You got to run around this track in 68 seconds. You only have to do it once. He's got to do it 105 times without a recovery. Do you want to have a go?" You know, we're both okay. You know, we were both okay athletes. I think Tony ran about a 3:47 1500. I ran a sort of 14:25,000. We went off, and we had a problem with timing it, and we got to the end of it and thought, "Oh, we're not sure we've done it." So anyway, we thought, right, we better go and do it again. So we had a couple of minutes recovery, did it again, and we did do it. I think we did it in 66 seconds, but we were gasping. We could not have gone on another 200 meters. And Eliud did that 105 times without 105 times. I think it's 105 or 108. I'm now losing my the data's going wrong at the moment. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I think what he did had absolute integrity. It was proper. It was entertaining. It brought the sport to more people than any other marathon ever has. And we can prove that through the statistics on Google and people that were looking at it, and anything. I mean, it became, again, whether this translate, but in, you know, it became part of pub conversations in Great Britain, and that doesn't happen for the marathon. It hasn't happened for 30, 40 years, and it was happening with Eliud. And I mean, we had a Eliud came to schools, to a British school where something called the Daily Mile, trying to get kids to run a mile every day. And he went with a top Tottenham Hotspur football player. So again, Tottenham Hotspur, one of the top teams in Britain. Normally, those kids, all they're interested in is football. So sorry, soccer. Need to get my language right. So normally they would only be interested in this soccer star. You know, be the equivalent of maybe one of your NFL players, Patrick Mahomes or someone like that turning up. They weren't interested in that athlete. They were only interested in Eliud, and it was just quite incredible to have a marathon runner, and that's exciting. And if we want our sport to live, to breathe, to prosper, we need to engage in a new way. We need to inspire more people. And I'm all for it, but do it with integrity. And absolutely, that event had integrity. And you know, other people will disagree with me, and they're allowed to. But I know how long we were debating so many bits of that, hours and hours and hours, and days and hours, every single bit of that event, and how so many teams were trying to work just to give him the best environment with which to do something that no human had ever done before.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't have to sell me on the validity of that moment. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, the innovation and the strategies around that, and the entertainment it brought, and to have an invested experience as just a sports fan in general, is something we haven't seen in an incredibly long time. And I'm sure it's you know, the sort of insights and momentum that you're hoping to bring into the broadcast, hopefully this year as well. And I think you may be starting a new workout terminology here: 4 times Kipchoge, would be like 4 times 468. So we should all.
Kipchoge.
That should be the workout this weekend.
Yeah.
I feel
it's actually 105 times Kipchoge, 105 times them. But yeah, for your some of your better listeners, just do 16 times a Kipchoge with a 1 minute recovery and see if you can do that. I'd be interested to know how many can.
I think I have a solution to this, this pacer issue and people having concerns about it. The Tour de France is going on right now. There is a specific kind of rider in these races called a domestique, right? Their whole role is to get their leader to the victory, right? So it's I just call that out because it's interesting. I'm watching that over the last couple of weeks, and you have a team of guys around the yellow jersey just trying to get this guy to the win, and that is their job, and that is
totally normalized.
Yeah.
And why couldn't we do that? Why couldn't we experiment? You start getting teams, it brings a different entertainment in it. It isn't the same entertainment, but it's different, and it's still running. Someone's got to run 26.2 miles, and they've got to decide along with their teammates, when are they going to push, when are they not going to push. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's those ideas. Whether you were serious or not, it's those sort of ideas that we look at and play around with and try and think outside the box.
When you do that, Hugh, I'm just gonna make sure everyone knows that idea started right here with this conversation. So when London Marathon's like, all right, we're introducing the domestique.
I think those conversations might already have started, so I don't think it's necessarily it's here.
Well, I'll just show everyone the clip before you just said that, and just be like, see, this is where we talked about it. Here we go.
Yeah, got edited.
I'm just in terms of this matchup, as a fan, you talk about Kipchoge being the GOAT, which I think is a widely shared view at this point. It wasn't too long ago that Kenenisa was that guy, right? And in that conversation, and he's kind of the guy now, just behind. He's one of his world records was just broken on the track. From your camp and your team and your elite directors, is there anything coming out of Kenenisa's side that's saying he's fired up right now, he's got something to prove, because he held the title of GOAT, he held the world record, and those are starting to go, and this is his chance to kind of show people, hey, I'm still here in that running and in that talk.
Yeah, look, I don't either have the authority or the I'm not Kenenisa, and I don't have the authority to speak for him. But all I can say is, if you speak to Jos Hermans, Jos will say Kenenisa is fired up, and why wouldn't he be? I mean, you just go back to what he did in Berlin and that incredible run and 2 seconds off the record, and yeah, it's such a difficult time. No one knows how they're going to be on the day. And that's the unbelievable thing just about Eliud's record is that on the day he keeps turning up and doing these amazing performances. And, there's one other athlete, David Weir, has done something like 20 consecutive London marathons. And if you start looking at his performance in those London marathons, they're quite incredible as well. So, but the number of athletes that can do that are so few. And the detail that Eliud and his team go into and the preparation they go into is incredible. But I know that Kenenisa, from Jos that he's fired up. But I think in reality, come to the press conferences the week of the marathon, they'll be going on. They'll be in this sort of Zoom environment, because they'll be in this new elite athlete hotel, and find out from yourself and ask him those questions.
Hugh, we have I think because you've experienced the typical London Marathon course, you've experimented with Vienna and I guess all the strategy around creating courses, right? And this year you're adapting the course again. now that you've experienced kind of 3 race formats, I guess, can you tell us, I think when the typical viewer might look at the course map around the park, I think most people's first reaction is, wow, that's short and it seems like a lot of tight turns. Are we like, is there an insight that maybe we're not seeing? Because I think that's a gut reaction for a lot of people, is like, that's a lot of turning. How can they keep the pace that hot with that many turns?
Yeah, I think people are probably reading the map a bit literally. How do they know that how do they know what radius we've put round the turn, round the corner? Yeah, you've got a very, very wide road. So therefore you can, in certain places, not all places, but you can reduce that radius. So look, it's different. It's it's 19.6 laps, and they're going in a clockwise direction, which is unusual. Normally if we're on a track, you're going anti-clockwise. There are going to be so many elements of this that they're different, that I don't think anyone knows on the day how each athlete is going to perform, how compared to how they normally did. But yeah, I think we're trying to make the course as quick as possible, through making the turns as appropriate as possible. We're trying to again use some of the most advanced measuring technology. I mean, you've still got to use the standard system, but there are other things that you can do to really hone in on the accuracy of the course. There are other elements of it that again that you'll see on the day where people will go, oh, they've done that, and they'll go, well, they might go, well, it's obvious, it does make sense, and some of these are really obvious things. Again, I'm not going to say what they are, but just again to try and enable the athletes to perform to their best. But it is different. It's being done. It is different to the Ineos 159 Challenge. It's being done under IAAF rules. Those rules are different, so the paces are more limited. We can't give Eliud or Kenenisa or any of the elite athletes. We can't hand them their bottles. And obviously, there's more than one person racing, which there wasn't. And those were the 3 things that stopped Vienna being a world record. And they're not that big. I mean, the biggest is the pacemaking. But so I'm, as I say, just fascinated to how it's going to be, and I'm sure there'll be lots of talking points, and people have their own opinions, which they're entitled to. But all we've tried to do is put on the best sporting spectacle, give it the integrity that it should have, and hope that the athletes on the day rise to the occasion, and we see something incredible.
Hugh, I've heard you talk about kind of analysis of courses and how the quickness of courses compare to one another. So I assume maybe you've done that with this version of the London Marathon course. How would you say this compares to what we know as the traditional course in terms of the ability for a runner to run fast?
In theory, it's quicker than the normal course, but it's not as quick as Vienna.
Okay.
And yeah, we've done the analysis. I'd have to look up my data. I don't remember the answer, but I do know the answer, but I don't remember it. And I'm honestly, that's not. I'm not trying to be. That was in May last year, or May. 15 months ago, 18 months ago, we were looking at that. There are some bits I absolutely remember, because it was one of the courses that we looked at, but it just was, really was not. Vienna was perfect. I mean, just an amazing city, how we were welcomed. As you've talked about the number of corners, you want to reduce the number of corners, how long the straights were, the conditions, running in the trees, the cover, wind cover, the pollution levels, so many different, even the the grading of the tarmac. There's just so many different elements that you look at, and every course is different. So you just don't know how an athlete's going to perform to that. Some athletes get more affected by it than others.
I did my Google Earth analysis the other day. So I'm not surprised to hear you say the turns can be shaped nicely. I noticed the roads widen, and there's what I looked at on the map is what I say the back stretch. I was like, this is pretty tree covered. Looked a lot like Vienna. So
yeah, and I just, for journalistic, I didn't say they were done nicely. I said they were done better than better than a sharp right hand corner. I still think not to be precise. If it's nicely, I think you want to have a radius of less than 34 meters in a corner, not to affect the performance. So all sorts of different factors going into it, but also the camber on the road and stuff. So you really get into the detail and start looking at all these things.
Hugh, I might bring up something that is like a nightmare scenario for a race director, but we referenced a pod interview you had earlier this year, and you mentioned how important the temperature is on the day for record attempts. And let's say it's the week of the race. You have the runners in the bubble, you have the roads closed, but the forecast is looking trash. It's going to be cold, windy, rainy. Is there a scenario where you push it a day or play with the start times?
Nope. None. It's really rain. Simple. I mean, no. Look, I mean, actually, at the moment, I mean, it's on Tuesday it was 30 degrees, and actually, cold is not the issue. The optimum temperature actually is around about 11 degrees.
And we're talking Celsius, people. Celsius.
Yeah, sorry. I've been talking football, soccer. I can't remember everything.
51 degrees Fahrenheit.
Thank you.
51.
So, I had no idea what it was. So thank you. Now I do know. Look, Britain is an island country, so wind, and the temperature we can't control. And look, this is not saying, I mean, this is not about athletes running world records. This is about athletes racing and doing some incredible performances, and us enjoying them going, head to head. And as I've said, that women's field is incredible, and just all the athletes trying to get Olympic qualification, and some of those athletes being paced by Mo Farah. I mean, come on! It's like, for him to help the British athletes to try and get qualification. There'll be races within races. There'll be all sorts of things going on. But please don't try and say, well, if it's not a world, if they don't do a world record, it's what a disappointment. If you go in with that attitude, again, hey, that's your attitude. Then you're welcome to it. I can't stop it. But I just hope that it's entertaining. That's what we want. We want to show the world marathon running. We have an opportunity to do that. We have an opportunity to prove that our sport is alive and well. And hopefully, we also have a duty to try and inspire other organisers to take this challenge. And in in Czechoslovakia, they've done some great stuff. So I think, as I say, I just hope that whatever the conditions, those athletes will meet them, and they will have run in them or something similar at some stage in their racing careers.
Yeah, I think you made a great point here, and then it's not necessarily the end result, but it's the moment, and I think we're all really looking forward to having a moment of seeing marathon running in 2020, and then also it's got to be an incredible moment for running fans and in general to see that picture of Buckingham Palace in the background, Mo rabbiting the race, and Bekele and Kipchoge, literally what a moment in time that we'll be able to look back on and say, gosh, remember 2020.
Yeah. And that's what we genuinely hope, that people really look at 2020, and for whatever it's gone on, just in terms of this event is a beacon of light, is something that people taking part in this new way, the 45,000 people around the world, around Britain, hopefully raising huge amounts of money for charity, and getting that finisher T-shirt, getting that medal, really, really treasure it, and remember it fondly, not necessarily remembering what is going on in society fondly, but that this was a positive experience, something that we, the running community, showed our togetherness. And that's what I just hope. Bit of love, bit of togetherness, bit of support to anybody. Just do that in life generally, but if do it in our running community would be just fantastic.
It's gonna be an awesome weekend. I'm really looking forward to it. I mean, it's we've had a few events start to pop up in the world of running, but I think having some of the biggest stars running together, it is going to be special, and something that I think a lot of people are going to be looking forward to here this year, 2020, much needed. So we really appreciate, I say Alex and I know that extends well past us. Just appreciate the efforts you and your team have done to get this off the ground and have this come to life. So, before we let you go, just thinking about your history with the event, your family's history, I think, correct me if I'm wrong on ages here, but you were about 15 when the event started. Is that correct? 15 years old. You've got to see this event literally start from nothing and grow to what it is today, and what it will be in this exceptional year that we're experiencing. I'm curious just what your memories are of the early days of this event, and how do things compare today to what you thought of it back then?
I mean, was I 15? I might have been 16. I think I was 16. Just it was school holidays, and I worked selling train tickets to 6,300 people who turned up to the Strand Palace Hotel, which is where the expo was, and it was in the basement of the Strand Palace Hotel. And I got paid £7 a day, I think it was. And I had to get my train ticket out of that. So I cycled to the station on my dad's bike. I worked from 8 in the morning to 8 at night. It was for 3 days. I got the princely sum of £21 minus my train fares. And then the marathon made 3p profit on every train ticket. So I worked out I'd made the marathon 189 quid. They'd paid me 21, and I didn't think that was very fair. So that was my first experience, and actually the actual experience, people go, well, what did you think the next day? And I went, well, actually I was fast asleep. I was absolutely exhausted from standing and selling tickets for 12 hours a day, cycling and to and from and getting there, and basically having about a 16-hour day work at the age of 16 for 3 days and getting paid £7. I mean, it was 50 pence less than 50 pence an hour. So I spent the next day asleep, and I didn't realize really what had gone on to the extent of how big it was until Monday morning, when I woke up, and I hadn't been asleep 24 hours, but when I woke up Monday morning, and I went downstairs, and there's a British newspaper called the Daily Mail, and that's one of the papers that my parents got then. And there on the front page of the Daily Mail was Dick Beardsley and Ingun Simonson crossing the line hand in hand. And that was the front page of the paper. And I'm suddenly going, goodness me, that's something pretty big. I just, it was one of those things my dad was doing amongst a load of other things. He was a journalist. He was an entrepreneur. There was sort of crazy times. I remember getting a phone call at midnight one night on the Saturday night before the race on Sunday, and it was my old man barking down the phone at me saying, can you go and open, I ran a specialty running retail store called Sweatshop said, can you go and open the shop and get me a pair of size 9 American Eagles? I'm not going to name the athlete. This British athlete has turned up with only one shoe. Can you deliver it to the Tower Hotel by 7 o'clock in the morning? And I'd been working for 5 or 6 days then up at the then, it was much bigger up at the Expo, and off I went at about 1 o'clock in the morning, opened the store, got a pair of size 9 American Eagles and delivered them to the Tower Hotel at about 6 o'clock the next morning. So look, there's lots of great experiences. I still run a bit, and I went on a run on Sunday, and I ran past my old man's grave and sort of had a bit of a chat with him, just saying what a crazy year it is, and he probably would just appreciate the what was going on. So it's such a privilege to be in this position and to be working with such a great team of people at London Marathon Events who are so committed and have been over so many years to make the event what it is, and to have created this event. And this will be our 40th, and to become one of the crown jewels of British sport is very humbling, and it's such a privileged position to be in.
Yeah, it's a very cool history. If we ever get to come over there in one of those other 51 weeks where you're not, in the heat of the marathon, would love to grab a pint and hear some of the history behind it. I mean, it's really fascinating, and I think that it's all of these races are so special, and they hold such a special place on the calendar each year for us as fans. But that connection with your family and seeing it from origination to where it is today, and to where it's gone just this year is just really a very interesting path. And so again, we really appreciate everything that you guys have done this year, and continue to do each year for the sport of running, not just for the elites, but as you said, all the money that you're raising for charities, all the opportunity you're giving people to put on some pair of shoes and experience a sport that I think the three of us have grown to love, and has been a special part in each of our worlds. So it's late there, Hugh. We're going to let you get to it and start getting back to work. But thanks so much for joining us, and we wish you all the best. And we're excited to be broadcasting it on FlowTrack here in a few weeks.
Great. And I hope your listeners love the day, enjoy it. And I'll be fascinated, A, to have the beer, and B, just find out with the few innovations that I've tried to tease you with, whether you thought they were any good or no good. So those are the innovations that the team are working on. And just thank you for your interest and your passion as well for the sport.
Hugh from London Marathon, Alex. I mean, I think the thing that first stands out, I think always stands out, is just the history that this man comes from athletic champions and his own family to moments of history that he and his family have been a part of. I mean, it's pretty significant, It was like hearing it and listening to some of the stories he's talking about, and pacing from Bannister's day. I don't mean, it's those. I could literally sit and have a beer with him for a few hours and just listen.
Oh man, does that guy have stories or what? 100% would love to have a beer with him. I think one of my favorite things, and I kind of brought up the debate, and I used the word proper, which I think if you're a UK fan or from the UK, you take that word very seriously. And he railed against it a little bit when I was talking about, the 159 project being proper. And I think, but my intent was to bring up just that conversation that we know is happening, right? What we know is happening in the running world, where some people were, question the legitimacy of Eliud's effort. But I think it's so interesting for Hugh to give us the perspective, because honestly, he is the authority here, right? Because he is the race director at a classic marathon, but he is also was also part of that 159 project, and he was enabling Eliud along the way. And he also has this family heritage of finding ways to push the boundaries, right, in athletic performance. So I think it's really interesting for him to give the perspective on whether something is legitimate, and to understand like where he's coming from, where when it comes to like setting the boundaries to like, okay, is this too much? And are we enabling the athletes too much? Like he is legitimately like he is the authority of like what's too much of an advantage and what is not. So I think like that was kind of my favorite part of the interview. And then the one other thing he said, like from a heritage perspective and like, just like the history of the event perspective, it would have been so easy to cancel. The easiest thing they could have done was cancel. And to be fair, a lot of events have done it. And if they had canceled, no one would have blinked at it. Everyone, there would have been support, right? It would have been so easy to do, and nobody would have criticized it. But pushed on, and you have to wonder that one of the reasons he pushed on is because he has such a deep heritage with the event.
Yeah. I think you're spot on. No one would have thought differently if the race was canceled. It would have just kind of been another casualty in the wake of COVID, and you would have moved on and said, well, I hope it happens next year, right? So I think it's the road less traveled in many ways, and a lot of that is not for a lot of people, it's not because of a choice. It's because they're almost forced into that choice because of regulations or local government or whatever it might be. So it's pretty amazing that we're going to get to experience the event in some form. And as a fan of Bekele growing up and Kipchoge, I mean, this is like, I'm thirsty to watch this. Back to your point, I'm just backtrack for a minute because I almost feel like this should be another pod on like the rules of what's okay and not okay when like planning a marathon. I want to say like we're talking about pushing the body to its limits, right? And again, there are obvious regulations and rules when you're thinking of doping and all these other kind of things that there are restrictions on. But when you're talking about, where there's shoes that we're been talking about for months, now we're talking about tightness of turns. We're talking about, can pacers be allowed? And if so, how many pacers? Can a guy have his water bottle handed to him or not? It's just, these are things that it's like, it's funny. It's like, so I can wear a pair of shoes that, are now proven to make me run a lot faster, but I need to go off course to get my water bottle, and so at the end of the day, at the end of the day, like we're pushing the body's limits, right? And when it's done within what most people I think believe to be an okay. And again, I'm kind of trying to section out the doping side of this whole like what is okay and not okay, right? I think that's on the pedestal of no, that's not in here, right? So let's just make that clear. But in all these other realms, he broke 2 hours in a marathon when we were talking about Kipchoge. That happened. When a woman runs in a women-only race, or they weren't running a race that has men around it, they ran the time they ran, right? And it's a body that's reached a new limit, a new height. And so anyway, I think it's a whole nother pod. And it was really interesting to get Hugh's take on it. But one of a couple of things that I also wanted to call out with that conversation is, we talk a lot about the elite side. We talked about some other aspects of the race, and Hugh always came back to his passion around inspiring people to be physically active. And it's not just about the elites or just about, people running in the actual physical race. He's pointing to this virtual race that sold out 45,000 people. And how it's anything that gets people active and healthy. That's his driver. And, I think we could probably say that of a lot of event directors, but it's refreshing to hear. And it also just puts it in perspective for us sometimes that are so excited to talk about the elite field and the elite race and what that's going to look like and how they figured it out and the details around that.
Yeah, and I think that's, hey, at the end of the day, guys, like the marathon and like the core of our sport is participation, right? And I think, you know, it's easy to want to like corner ourselves in elite life, right? But I think we can live together and we can embrace the participation and the mass joy that we can all share together, right? And I think it really felt like, you know, that was still at the core of like the whole London Marathon team, and kudos to them, because they could come off super elitist, right? They're talking about Eliud and we're talking about Bridget Koskai, right? But no, like still at the core, it's about participation, and you have to appreciate that. So kudos to Hugh, and again, kudos to his team for making this thing happen. We are very grateful for that, and we are all looking forward to the broadcast, that 8-hour broadcast. That's just music to my soul, an 8-hour marathon broadcast.
8 hours of marathon.
I know, and but on the day we're going to see some of the innovations and the explorations that he teased us. He's keeping a lot of things close.
So much teasing, Hugh.
So much teasing, keeping things close to the chest. It's almost like he's keeping it beneath the grandstand. So hopefully we can bring those ideas out to you, and we can celebrate them and talk about some of the changes and innovations brought forth. So folks, we really appreciate you joining us. Please share this with your friends, and especially share it on the days leading up to the London Marathon. If you have somebody in your life who is running it, please support them, and because we appreciate you and we appreciate your support. So until next time, we'll see you beneath the grandstand.